Hello and welcome to the Bored Filmmaker Challenge review video. This is where I review the videos that you guys submitted to the Bored Filmmaker Challenge. So this was a challenge I posted a little while ago about making a short film in quarantine. The rules were it had to be 60 seconds or less, it had to take place entirely in one location, wherever you happen to be stuck in quarantine right now, and it had to feature a character who was bored at home. Beyond that, it was open to your imagination, and I got a lot of amazing submissions, but I had to pick just a few to review today. Otherwise, this video would be like 10 hours long. So I made a playlist of my favorites, and I'm putting them on my channel. So if you want to watch any of these videos back later, you can just go to that playlist. So I'm going to start going through the videos now and telling you what I like about them, what I think might be able to be improved, and we're going to start with kind of a special video because this one was made by my own little brother, Nick Lee. So Nick, I'm putting your video first, also because it stars my dad. My dad is the guy in the video. Okay, so let's get started with Ghost by Nick Lee. Go. Great job building the atmosphere here with the lightning and the thunder, you know, the incidental lighting, the flashes of light. Using my dad's flashlight to light his face, as well as a little bit of the environment. That's great. Oh, newspaper says man struck by lightning dies of injuries. Cool. Storytelling. And I believe that's digital rain, which you added in post. Really good job with that too. Can't quite, okay. All right, I really like that video. I think that's really cool right up until the very end. And then it's a little bit confusing for me because the calendar, I think it says calendar that he finds on the ground. Let me go back to the calendar. I can't quite tell what this says. Yeah, it says human era calendar, the year 12,017. So I guess this has something to do with maybe my dad dying and then being resurrected in the year 12,017. The description of the video says a man relives his final moments before returning to his ethereal form in the future. So yeah, the ending's a little bit hazy. But the filmmaking technique leading up to that of my dad walking through the house, that's really good. I think you did an amazing job. And yeah, I love the rain effects, the lightning effects, all that stuff, and tracking behind my dad. Those kinds of shots are really hard. It's really hard to film in low light with flashes of light and have everything be visually intelligible to the audience, making the audience be able to tell what's going on in the scene, just making it clear. So great job there. And yeah, the only thing I would suggest for improvement would be the clarity of the very end, because that's kind of like the punchline, you know? If you're telling a joke, the very end of the joke is what's most important. It's the punch. It's the thing that your audience leaves remembering the most. So I would suggest just trying to make sure that the explanation at the very end is super, super clear. Clarity is the most important thing in filmmaking above all else, because if your audience doesn't understand your intention, if they don't understand what the logic of the story is, then it's hard for them to enjoy the other elements of the story as much, because we spend our whole time wondering what's going on and why things are happening this way. Okay, so Nick, really awesome job. Thank you for submitting to the challenge. Let's move on to the next video. The next video we're gonna watch here is Quarantine by Darius Lipka. Great overhead tracking shot. And it builds the story, 754th day of pandemic, so I love the environment around him. Great world building here. That was a good visualization of the text message, and now we're in his perspective.
Special Forces here. We noticed that you didn't wash your hands on time. Open the door now, or we use force.
Okay. If you want to learn a whole lot more, then join my film school, Unscripted Studio, where I teach my unique style of improvisational filmmaking. You'll learn storytelling, directing and shooting, gear, editing, transitions and effects, and building your business. And most importantly, you can join our online community forum where you'll do filmmaking challenges, share your work, and get creative feedback. This is the most important part of becoming a better filmmaker. So check out the link in the description and join us at Unscripted Studio. Let's go through it again. I'll talk a little bit about my thoughts on this. So the world building here is great. It's got a very particular aesthetic to it. You know, you can tell this guy has been sitting around in his house for a very, very long time. And so the subtitle that tells you 754th day of pandemic, of course, makes that very, very clear. So what Darius did here is some very efficient exposition. And exposition is when you tell the audience the information they need to know before they can understand the story. If this video had started here, let's start like at this point, where the guy pulls off his headphones and he's just sitting in the room. If we hadn't seen anything before that moment, then we wouldn't really understand the story. We wouldn't know that this guy has been in quarantine for almost 800 days. So the premise of the story would be lost without those expository shots at the beginning. But of course, the trick in filmmaking is to make your exposition as clear and as entertaining as possible and as brief as possible. You don't want to spend very long explaining to the audience the world of the video. You want to just get straight to the plot. So he does a great job at the beginning here, just tracking over the painting and the books and the mess, the general mess that's around this guy, of establishing that world. And then we quickly get a sense of the character's desperation because he will drink that vodka that's been in that glass for who knows how long with a Twizzler stuck in it. Twizzler straw, I assume. And then this is another clever way to visualize something that's usually pretty hard to do visually, which is a text message. There's a million different ways that you can show a text message in your film, and usually just displaying it on the actual screen of the phone is not the best way because it's hard to read. So what he did, instead of putting it on the screen, is to just put a message next to the phone as if there's some sort of a holographic projection coming from the phone. Who knows, maybe we've advanced our technology a lot in 800 days of quarantine. But whatever, it works for me. That running shot, that's a Sonora cam type of shot. It was popularized by the movie Pi. For all you film nerds out there, the movie Pi by Darren Aronofsky. You mount the camera on the person. So maybe this guy was just like holding a monopod or a gimbal, and the camera was like here and he was holding it and the lens was pointed towards his face, or maybe it was actually mounted to his body. I don't know, but really cool technique. And then here, the camera's not mounted at his eye level, it's mounted at waist level because it gives us a clearer view of the sink. So I like that POV shot that's not actually a POV. And I appreciate the blurring out of the name on the soap. I'm not sure why that was necessary, but that's interesting. And then, there's just more conflict. We see the gun, right? The gun in his back pocket. This escalates the tension further because now we have a gun in our plot. And if anyone knows the Chekhov's gun rule of script writing, it's that if you show a gun in Act 1, then you need to use the gun by the end of the play or the end of the movie. That's Chekhov's gun. So, if there's a gun shown in somebody's drawer, then at some point during the plot, someone should use that gun. And he does sort of do that at the end of this film. You notice a little bit of sci-fi there with the voices. They're distorted voices, so it gives us the sense that the world outside is futuristic. And then boom, there comes the gun. So a lot of little dramatic tricks being used here, very skilled filmmaking. Really appreciate the effort, great video. Next up is Brom by Ankit Mehrotra. And I will butcher some of these names. I apologize if I don't pronounce your name properly. Love the still life shots at the beginning. Very clean compositions, and I love that quick cut. Nice flashbacks.
लॉकडाउन अभी अपनी सुरक्षा के लिए जरूरी है। सरकार के दिए नियमों का
Beautiful lighting.
पालन करें। ऐसे समय पर अकेलेपन की वजह से मानसिक स्वास्थ्य पे गहरा असर हो सकता है। हमेशा सकारात्मक सोच बनाए रखें।
छिप चुके आप।
What I like about this short film is the way it very efficiently sets a mood, and it gives you a sense of the predicament that our character is in, and it creates a bit of psychological intrigue in a very short amount of time. This has a serious tone. This film has a very somber, slow, studied feeling to it, and the compositions are all very well balanced, very well composed. But it's not static, and that's what I think is kind of nice about this film. We have a lot of still shots where not a lot is moving in the shot, but the way that he's cutting from one shot to the next keeps building the story. What I mean by that is let's start at the beginning. So at the beginning, we see the world outside through windows, which is very important. We're seeing what the protagonist would see through the window. These aren't drone shots flying over a city. We're very much only seeing from the limited perspective of our character. And that's an important filmmaking tool because it forces your audience to be in the same position as your character. You notice these interiors are very confined feeling. He's using sort of a long lens, which means like a telephoto lens. And when you use a longer telephoto lens, it compresses the distance, so things that are further away appear to be closer, and everything sort of gets smashed on top of each other, making the house feel more confined, which is the goal of the story, showing how our character is confined in the house. If he had used a wide-angle lens, it would have opened things up, and it would have achieved the opposite of the story's purpose. Then we have our protagonist here in a very clear close-up shot. That's great because it establishes for the audience who they should care about. Having a clear close-up of your protagonist when you first show them is really important in a short film. Otherwise, it might be hard for the audience to know how they should feel about the story because they don't know which perspective they're viewing the story from. Also, there's a sound effect that he reacts to, right? So that creates a question right away. So let's watch that again. The sound effect. So the moment there's a sound effect, you see his eyebrows raise. Now that sound effect was of course added in post, which means that the eyebrow raise was directed during the film. So that was something that he worked out, before he filmed it. There would be a sound effect there and the man would react to it. Sounds like a really simple thing, but those kinds of subtleties are easy to forget if you're sort of making up the story as you go along. So those are just great little touches to add. I also love the quick cuts here. This is a way to have a lot of motion in your video without moving the camera. Notice the camera is perfectly steady at all times. And I think maybe he was filming himself, and that's why the camera doesn't move. Camera had to be on a tripod, but I like the aesthetic. Very well composed close-up shots too. Each of these could be a photograph, right? That could be a photograph. It's well lit, it's well composed. This could be a photograph. So the composition is very photographic, and because he's so close on these items, he's able to cut more quickly. You see, even with those really quick cuts, we still know exactly what's going on. And that's because the shots are very clear, the subject is centered, and it's very close up. And that burner, I love the cut of the burner to him sitting there, and this is just a beautiful shot unto itself, but it's establishing that he made coffee for himself without having to show any more of the process. And I know we all on YouTube love to show ourselves making coffee, but believe me, the audience does not want to see every step of the coffee making process unless it's absolutely crucial to the plot. And this plot is not about coffee, it's about a man losing his mind. Yeah, and that quick cut sequence of the books, very, very well done. And the wide shots, the lighting on these shots is great because we have little pockets of light in each corner of the frame. So it's not just like one big wash of light across the shot, it's little bits of light And that creates a lot of depth. When you have light, dark, light, dark, light, dark, or sorry, light, dark. Yeah, that kind of lighting, which of course was just happening naturally in the house, it adds a lot of texture to your shots. It's something you just have to be on the lookout, for, because you can't always control the lighting too much. Yeah, and then we go into, so the voiceover. This is one thing that I missed the first time I saw it. The voiceover, or the announcer speaker, says loneliness may affect one's mental being, which then when it cuts to night here, right here, it cuts to night, then explains why his twin steps into frame. So it did take me 2 times of watching this video. Maybe I just wasn't paying attention, but it took me 2 times to see that. And my only suggestion for the filmmaker is maybe to take the title, The Delusion, and put it at the beginning, so the audience knows a little bit more what to expect with the film, because the YouTube video is just called Brom short film, so that doesn't really tell us, what this film is about. I would rather see the title, The Delusion, both on the YouTube post and at the beginning of the film. That way I know when he sees his twin enter the shot, we know that's a delusion, and it explains what's going on by the end a little bit more clearly for people like me who may have not been paying enough attention. But otherwise, absolutely beautiful short film. Okay, let's move on. Next up is Stay Home, a film by Jack Liu. This is a film that was not created for this challenge. It was created for Film Riot's challenge, but I liked it, so I'm going to talk about it anyway.
One of those exercises that simultaneously sounds ridiculously easy.
Okay, so we're seeing that our character deeply misses the outside world. Nice. What I liked with that film is that we had a very relatable problem, wanting to go back out, everybody's feeling that right now, shown to us in a way that was visceral, because you have the quick cut montage, and also had a clever button at the end. That's really, I'd say half the reason I included it in this playlist was just because of this moment here. I'm going to play it for you. Just that. Because it says a lot with a very simple action that everybody can understand. And the title comes up, which makes it extra clear. But those kinds of little button moments, those are what really help to sell a short film or a commercial or some other highly economical form of filmmaking where you don't have a lot of extra time to explain stuff. And even in feature films, good films are full of those little moments, those little button moments that tell you a lot with a very, very tiny action. In terms of dialogue, one of the most famous examples I can think of is when Princess Leia in Star Wars says, "I love you," and then Han Solo says, "I know." It says everything about Han Solo's character for him to say, "I know," instead of for him to say, "I love you," back to her. So those kinds of things. It's a short form way of saying that our character changed his mind. The beginning to me feels maybe just a little bit drawn out, a little bit slow. And I'm not crazy about just one cut here from this perspective. So this is like we're sort of spying on him. This is sort of a voyeuristic perspective because we're looking through the door frame at the guy. Then we cut into another angle here. There. Which doesn't really add a lot to the scene for me. And right here is when we really need to start to empathize with our main character. So I would say maybe we don't need this voyeuristic perspective here, even though it looks nice. Maybe we don't need that angle. Maybe it's better just to go straight to this angle because this quickly establishes who our protagonist is and that he's on his computer, and that's about all we need to know. These two shots, they're so similar, I don't really know what we gain by cutting from here to here. But other than that, I think the editing is really good, the way it draws you into our character's wants. He wants to go outside, he wants to experience the natural world, he wants to get his hair cut and do all these normal things. So that aspect of the cutting I really like. I love, the KFC commercial and all this relatable stuff. And the scratching of the finger, very clearly tells us what our character's thinking without having to see his face and without having him actually say anything. So this wordless visual kind of filmmaking, very effective. And the horizon being crooked on this shot tells us that our character is in an agitated mental state. They do this all the time in movies. Famous example being the first Mission Impossible movie with Tom Cruise, when he gets accused of being a mole about a third of the way into the movie in that big restaurant that's an aquarium. When he realizes that he's being accused of being a traitor, the angle goes from being like this, straight up and down, to suddenly being crooked. And now we're seeing Tom Cruise from a Dutch angle, and the conversation gets a lot more dynamic and a lot more tense just because the camera got a little bit tilted. That's called a Dutch angle. Okay, so really good use of that here. And yeah, and that moment. Good job, Jack Liu. Next up, Paper Princess by SkyMax. So coming up here, you'll see why I picked this film. I just think it's really clever that she took her toilet paper and turned herself into a paper princess. I can't imagine how much work this must have taken. Great job on Paper Princess. My first question is, was that really made just for this challenge? I looked at the description here, and it says this is my entry to Brandon Lee's Bored Filmmaker Challenge. I can't see any other way that they used this video, but oh my God, that must have been a lot of work. I can't believe you did that much work for this challenge. From a storytelling perspective, I just love that it's sort of a clever solution to the problem of boredom during quarantine. No other video had a premise that was even remotely similar to that. And of course, the world's obsession with toilet paper, or maybe it's just the United States, the obsession with toilet paper is touched on here when she builds her dress out of toilet paper, so that's super clever. Yeah, and in general, I thought it was a well put together video. I thought it was just a cleverly told, cute, heartwarming little story. If I had some critiques, it would be, let's see. Well, your exposure here. The window's a little blown out. I know that's hard to avoid. Not really a big deal. Now, here's a question. She gets inspired by Alexander McQueen, right? To me, that takes a little bit away from our character's creativity, a little bit away from her autonomousness, I guess. There's probably a better word for that. But basically, in movie making, you generally want your characters to make decisions on their own for the most part. That's what makes it exciting. And the fact that she got her idea from Alexander McQueen, I don't know, it's just a narrative choice, but I think maybe it makes her a little bit less of an independent character, a little bit less of a proactive main character. So I would have probably just cut from her maybe staring at the empty mannequin, or the unadorned mannequin here, the sewing model, whatever you call that. Just have her maybe staring at that for a while, and then you could even have a scene, I don't know, where she's in the bathroom and she reaches for the toilet paper and she gets an idea as she looks at the toilet paper, something like that. I would want to see how the character comes up with the idea to use toilet paper to make a dress, because to me the interesting thing is it's not that she decides to make a white dress, it's that she makes it out of toilet paper, and I want to see how she decided to use toilet paper. And we don't actually see that in the film. We see her looking at her magazine, She's seeing the Alexander McQueen ad, or whatever that is. And then she looks at her mannequin, right? And then we see her face light up. But we don't see the moment where she decided toilet paper was the best way to go about making that dress. So that would be my only criticism from a storytelling standpoint. Otherwise, really nice video. Next up, we're watching Life in Quarantine by Bernard Lim. I love the editing here. I love all the jump cuts. Perfectly cut to the music.
Air masak jangan minum air tidak masak. Air masak. Okay. Kalau boleh disuam sikit. Suam sikit.
I wish I knew what he said on the news. Try to drink warm water. Okay, so it's ways to deal with COVID-19, I think. Keep yourself healthy. The reason I picked that video was because of the energy, the editing style, the really creative use of jump cuts, and the character that was in it. Because I feel like Bernard Lim is a singular character. Like, he has a very unique personality, and his personality was shown really well in this video. The reason the jump cuts work here in the beginning is because they're synchronized so well to the video, and because his silhouette keeps changing shapes. If he hadn't been in such a strong silhouette in that sequence, and by silhouette I mean dark shape against a light background, if he hadn't been so dark against a bright window, then it would have been harder to tell what was going on in those moments, wouldn't have been as clear, and the jump cuts would not have had as much punch to them. And of course it's synchronized perfectly to the music, which goes without saying. And of course the impressive acrobatics don't hurt. And then there's the choice of clothes and deciding to forego the pink boxers, which is cute.
Air masak jangan minum air tidak masak. Air masak.
And then following the instructions here, this is all further storytelling. You know, it's not just random B-roll, it's not just shots of stuff. It's showing our character throughout his day as he keeps himself healthy, and also giving us an idea of the entertainment he likes because he's watching The Last Airbender. Or Avatar, I guess the show is called Avatar. And as the music changes speed, the edits kind of follow that. So I like that there's a progression and there's a lot of variety in the tempo of the shots, and it kind of matches the tempo of the music too. So one suggestion here though, from a storytelling perspective, so there's this gag with the food, right? He spends a lot of time showing that our character does not have any good food to eat, but the cat does. There's this joke here with the cat, right? So the cat has food, but the guy doesn't. That's funny, but I wanted to see sort of a conclusion to that gag. It doesn't really have one. It just goes here, back to him looking at the camera, and then more daily life stuff, more housekeeping and entertaining himself. And I feel like this housekeeping and, you know, prancing around the room, like that kind of stuff, should go earlier in the video, and we should end on the food gag, because that's kind of the punchline. And what I would imagine to really sell this gag is, what if he looks, he sees the cat food, pan over to the cat, looking at the camera, fine. But then I want to see his hand reach into frame and take the food. I want to see him take the cat food. And then maybe we cut to the cat looking pissed off or something like that. That would have been a funny punchline to the food gag for me. But yeah, that's about all I have to say in terms of criticisms. Otherwise, really cute video and lots of personality. Next up, we're watching Corona Family Norm, and this one is by Justin Bren. So really quickly, we're establishing a comedic scenario here. He's stuck outside, wife's inside. He's out of toilet paper. That's disgusting. He used the roll, I guess. Nasty. So I chose this video because it had a great little comedic twist halfway through, which is the guy who we assumed had COVID-19 or was suspected of having COVID-19 turns out to be negative in his test results, and his wife, who has been ostracizing him, turns out to be positive. So that's a clever little twist. It's good writing to set up things one way and have everything flip halfway through the story. That's a good little plot twist. And you know, there's some funny character moments here. Like we get a really clear sense that the guy is sort of a bumbling everyman, you know, who makes a lot of little mistakes, and that makes him endearing. And you know, it's a common comedy type of character, right? To have the bumbling dad sort of character. And then we have the wife who was sort of abusing him out there, and then she gets her comeuppance. She gets what's coming to her because she ends up having the COVID-19. This title here, a little bit clunky on the test results. Whatever, it's fine, it's a comedy video, it didn't bother me. The only thing I would change as far as story goes is establishing a little more clearly that he is quarantined outside from the family, showing, because I mean, it's pretty clear that he's outside because he probably has the virus and she's inside because she probably doesn't. But it's not stated super explicitly. So for about 10 seconds while I was watching this the first time, I thought maybe he was like not really living at the house, and you know, he was just some stranger, and he had been trying to go inside the house for some reason. You know, and on further reflection, of course, that doesn't really make sense. But I think maybe at the beginning of the film, if the wife had brought the husband something, or she had maybe set some food outside for him, somehow showing that she was taking care of him from afar, I think that would have established a little more clearly that they were a couple. That was the only thing that I wasn't totally clear on. And of course, clarity is number one in storytelling. If your story's not clear, then the audience spends, you know, the whole time wondering what's going on instead of getting emotionally invested in your characters and your plot. So you want to establish clarity in your story right off the bat, make everything crystal clear so that people can understand it, even if they're not paying full attention, or even if they are a little bit simple in the mind, like maybe I am, because it took me a while. I think it was when she handed him the Lysol. That's when I first realized that they were 100% for certain married. And yeah, I would just move that to the beginning of the video, or maybe have her put breakfast outside for him, something like that, to take care of him. Okay, so really cute, funny, short video. And notice one thing about this, the color grade. This is a comedy color grade. The color is very well done for comedy. It's high key. It's light, it's bright, it's sunny. This helps to create a light mood. So I like that the look of the video very closely ties with the tone of the video and the genre of the video. Next up, we're watching The Nap by Oliver Killian.
Bloody hell. What happened?
I believe you took a nap and missed your previous alarms.
There's a cool overlay effect, of course, here, and good establishment
What time is
of
it?
a futuristic
It's
POV.
4:30 p.m. on Tuesday.
I was out the whole night.
An accomplishment indeed.
Yeah, okay, sassy pants. Quarantine report.
Global infection increased by 68%. A 7 p.m. curfew has been implemented and drone surveillance deployed.
Exposition.
Toilet paper supply is low.
Toilet paper supplies low.
Fantastic.
That's funny.
Well, just another Tuesday then.
Yes, it would seem so.
Can I get some privacy, please?
Stealth mode activated. Entering sleep mode until further notice.
Okay. So I thought that one was funny. I thought it had a pretty good punchline at the end, and it was handled in a very droll, dry way. You know, I like that kind of humor. They didn't overplay the comedy of it because our character just wanted to have a little private time with his Pornhub, and he treated it like we would actually treat it in the situation if we were talking to Alexa or to, you know, Siri or some sort of home computer. He didn't oversell the joke. He played it like it would naturally happen in real life. And I'm probably over-explaining the joke right now as I even talk about it. Of course, we all get it. But, you know, this is a short film that plays on a lot of genre tropes. And by genre trope, I mean little aspects of certain types of films that we all recognize, like the HUD, the heads-up display, and the POV. This all implies that our character is somehow living in the future. He's cybernetically enhanced or something, and his vision is augmented. So even though everything in the scene is, of course, the year 2020, this display gives us some indication that maybe the story itself is taking place in the near future. So, you know, otherwise, yeah, it was pretty much just that punchline at the end that I thought was clever, and the way that the interaction between his voiceover and his digital assistant was handled, the way he talked to the digital assistant, and also, you know, the exposition, the way we got our information was handled cleverly. He asked for an update, right? So our character asked for information. Instead of the audience being spoon-fed information in a really boring way, like a newscast on TV, we got a little interplay between our character and his digital assistant, which felt more natural. So I like that we got information very quickly, very efficiently, and then he made a little joke. Where is it?
A 7 p.m. curfew has been implemented and drone surveillance deployed. Toilet paper supply is low.
Fantastic. Well, just another Tuesday then.
Yes, it would seem so.
Just another Tuesday. So that's one thing to keep in mind if you're writing dialogue for exposition. If you are trying to explain something dry to the audience, such as, you know, he needed to explain that the virus was getting worse, that the pandemic was getting worse, that's what the audience needed to know. If you're going to explain something dry like that, then throw in a joke. They do it all the time in movies. You know, after the fact is introduced, then a little clever quip is thrown in there at the end to wake the audience back up and to bring them back into the story. Because we all start to drift away a bit when we hear facts being rattled off. So, you know, the most probably overused example of this is when a scientist says something in a movie and then somebody else says, in English, please, you know, as if they need it dumbed down and explained to them. Well, you know, it's one way of explaining something in a simple way so the audience will understand, but it's also a way of adding a little bit of humor into a scene that could otherwise be dry. So great job on the nap.